Between 17 and 50 SS guards, hands in the air, surrendered. 20 minutes later they were dead, shot by American soldiers. Not in combat, not in self-defense, executed against a coal yard wall in Bavaria on the last Sunday of April 1945. When the report reached General George Patton's desk in Bad Tölz, it recommended a court-martial for the American battalion commander who had failed to stop the killings. A 27-year-old lieutenant colonel named Felix Sparks, a man who had already lost his rifle company at Anzio, a man who had already lost his battalion in the Vosges, a man who was staring down a possible court-martial that could end his career, his freedom, and everything he had fought for since 1941. Patton read the report. He looked at the officer standing at attention in front of his desk, and then he did something that shocked every officer who read the paperwork afterward. If you had been in Patton's chair, and you had seen what those soldiers saw that morning, what would you have done? This is the story of what General George S. Patton said when they asked him to destroy his own men for killing the men who ran a death camp. Stay with me, because the answer is not what most people think it is. To understand what happens next, we have to go back. Not just weeks, not just months, we have to go back 12 years, to a small town in Bavaria, to a former munitions factory being converted into the first Nazi concentration camp. We have to go back to a place called Dachau, March 1933. Adolf Hitler has been Chancellor for 6 weeks. The Reichstag has just burned, and on the outskirts of a quiet Bavarian town, the SS opens the first concentration camp in Nazi Germany. It is not built for Jews, not yet. It is built for communists, social democrats, priests, trade unionists, anyone who might oppose the new regime. For 12 years the camp will operate without pause. 12 years of hunger, 12 years of medical experiments, 12 years of executions in the courtyard, 12 years of chimneys burning day and night. By April 1945, the official death toll at Dachau stands at 31,591 confirmed. The real number is higher. Nobody will ever know how much higher. The camp cycles through commandants like it cycles through prisoners. Each one more brutal, more efficient, more indifferent. The last official commandant is SS Obersturmbannführer Eduard Weiter, 55 years old, a former book salesman from Hesse. A man who orders the execution of a prisoner named Georg Elser and writes it off as an Allied bombing casualty. On April 26, 1945, Weiter hears the American guns in the distance. He does not stay. He gathers a transport of prisoners and drives south into the Austrian Alps toward a castle called Schloss Itter. He will be dead within a week. Command falls back to a former commandant named Martin Gottfried Weiss. Weiss ran the camp from 1942 to 1943 and has been brought back in the final emergency. He stays for 2 days. Then he too vanishes into the countryside, wearing civilian clothes. That leaves one man in charge of Dachau, 23-year-old lieutenant. He arrived at the camp yesterday as a junior training officer. When Weiss abandoned the camp within hours, command fell to him by default. He has never commanded anything larger than a training unit. His name is Heinrich Wicker. He does not know that within 72 hours he will be dead. This is the first twist of the story. The man who will hand Dachau over to the United States Army, the man who will represent 12 years of industrial murder in that final hour, is younger than most of the American soldiers who will kill him. He did not build the camp. He did not run the crematoria. He did not sign the death orders. He arrived yesterday. But the American soldiers will not know that. They will not care. And when they walk through the gates of Dachau, the young lieutenant with the white flag will be indistinguishable from every other black uniform. Just a man in an SS coat standing between them and their rage. Wicker's fate is sealed by a chain of decisions made by men who ran long before he arrived. This is how Dachau ends, not with the guilty facing justice, but with the last man left holding the flag. 27-year-old Felix Sparks does not know any of this yet. On the morning of April 29, 1945, he does not know Dachau exists. He was born in San Antonio, Texas on August 2, 1917. When he was 4, his family moved west to a copper mining town called Miami, Arizona, where his father worked underground. Then the Great Depression came. The mine closed. The Sparks family stood in food lines with 5 children. In 1935, at 18, Felix left home. He rode freight trains looking for work. He slept in parks. In San Francisco, a recruiting sergeant walked past him on Market Street and asked if he wanted to join the army. He said yes. There was nothing else to say. He was sent to Hawaii, Coast Artillery, 2 years watching the ocean. He got out in 1938 and enrolled at the University of Arizona. He met a girl named Mary Blair. They married in Tucson in June 1941. 6 months later came Pearl Harbor. Sparks was recalled to active duty, assigned to the 45th Infantry Division, the Thunderbirds. National Guard troops from Oklahoma, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. Farm boys, ranch boys, miners' sons, salt of the earth. 18 months of hard training in the deserts of Texas and Louisiana. Then transferred to North Africa in June 1943, and by July they were on the beaches of Sicily, Salerno. Anzio. Anzio is where Felix Sparks became someone else. February 16, 1944, the Via Anziate, fog rolling across the flat Italian plain. Captain Sparks commanded Company E, 2nd Battalion, 157th Infantry Regiment, around 200 men. They were dug in on the western edge of the battalion line. At dawn, Sparks saw figures moving in overcoats. He called headquarters. He asked if the neighboring regiment had overcoats issued. Headquarters said no. Then he understood. Those were Germans. The artillery came first, then the Panzer Grenadiers, then the tanks. Company E fought until it stopped being a company. When it was over, Sparks looked around and counted the survivors of his platoon. There were two, him and one other man. Every other soldier in that group was dead, captured, or missing. Sparks was pulled from the line. Wounded by shrapnel. Doctors in North Africa declared him unfit for duty. He snuck onto a transport plane and flew back to Italy against orders. Military police were waiting to arrest him when he came off the line. The charges were dropped. There was nobody left to replace him with. By August 1944, he was in southern France. By January 1945, he was a lieutenant colonel commanding an entire battalion. And on the night of January 14, 1945, in the Vosges mountains, near a village called Reipertswiller, 4 of his rifle companies were surrounded and cut apart by the 6th SS Mountain Division. Waffen-SS. For a week, Sparks tried to break through and rescue them. He sent tanks. The tanks were destroyed. He sent an aid party. It was ambushed. Radio contact went dead, one company at a time. On the last day, when the survivors of the pocket came back through American lines, only 2 men from a battalion of hundreds walked out under their own power. Sparks vomited in the snow. He would later write that Reipertswiller was the worst experience of his life, worse than Anzio, worse than anything he had ever imagined a human being could feel. By April 1945, over 2,500 men of the 157th Infantry Regiment had become casualties under his command. He was still 27 years old. This is the second twist. The soldiers who will walk into Dachau on April 29th are not strangers to the SS. They have been fighting the Waffen-SS for months. They have watched their friends die under Waffen-SS machine guns in the snow of the Vosges. They have seen Waffen-SS troops execute wounded prisoners in ditches. They have buried the results. And on April 29, 1945, when Sparks's battalion arrives at the gates of Dachau, the men in the black uniforms are not the aging camp administrators who have run the place for 12 years. Those men are gone. The men standing guard at Dachau on that Sunday morning are largely Hungarian Waffen-SS. Combat troops rushed in from other subcamps in the final days. The same category of soldier who annihilated Sparks's battalion in the mountains 3 months earlier. This is not a random encounter. This is a reunion, and the men of the Thunderbirds do not know it yet, but everything they are about to do has already been decided by things that were done to them months before by men wearing the same uniforms. Meanwhile, 17 days before Dachau on April 12, 1945, a black staff car pulls into a camp near a town called Ohrdruf. 3 American generals climb out: Dwight Eisenhower, Omar Bradley, George Patton. Ohrdruf is a subcamp of Buchenwald. It was liberated 4 days earlier by the 4th Armored Division. The men who liberated it have been trying to figure out what to do with what they found, so they called the generals. Come see this. You need to see this. The generals walk through the compound. They see bodies stacked in courtyards. They see a burned pyre with human skeletons still visible in the ashes. They see prisoners so thin their skin has become translucent. A survivor demonstrates the torture positions the SS guards forced them into. In one shed, 30 bodies are laid out on the floor. The SS has dusted them with lime to cover the smell. Bradley walks in, he walks out. Eisenhower walks in. He walks out. His face is white, but he says nothing. Patton refuses to enter. He is afraid he will vomit if he goes inside. He walks around to the far side of the shed instead, and then, out of sight of his own men, George S. Patton, the general who slapped shell-shocked soldiers, the general who prayed for good weather so he could kill more Germans, the general who believed war was the highest human endeavor, bends over behind the shed and throws up. That evening, Eisenhower gives a short statement. He looks at his officers and he says, "We are told that the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for." Now at least, he will know what he is fighting against. Patton orders the mayor of Ohrdruf to bring the town's civilians to the camp. Make them see, make them look, make them bury the dead with their own hands. The next night, the mayor of Ohrdruf and his wife go home. They put on their best clothes, and they hang themselves in their kitchen. This is the third twist. When George Patton reads the investigation report about Dachau 8 weeks later, he is not reading it as a 4-star general. He is not reading it as a military bureaucrat. He is reading it as a man who has been to Ohrdruf. A man who has smelled what his soldiers smelled. A man who has vomited behind a shed because his body could not contain what his eyes had seen. Patton is not neutral. Patton is compromised. Patton has already made his decision in a lime-covered shed in Thuringia, 17 days before the first American boot touched Dachau soil. He just doesn't know it yet. Every judgment he will render about the killings on April 29 will be filtered through what he saw on April 12. This is not going to be justice. This is not going to be law. This is going to be a man remembering. April 28, 1945, nightfall. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks is somewhere in southern Bavaria. His orders are clear. Push south. Take Berchtesgaden. The Eagle's Nest. Find Adolf Hitler. Kill him or capture him. Either works. His battalion is exhausted. They have been fighting through Germany for weeks. They have taken Aschaffenburg. They have taken Nuremberg. They have watched Nazi officials hang themselves from lampposts as the Americans approached. They can smell the end of the war in the air. Berchtesgaden is the finish line, the Alpine fortress where the man who started all of this has retreated to die. 2,000 miles of war, and Sparks might be the man who ends it. Then the runner comes, a dispatch from Colonel Walter O'Brien, commanding the 157th Infantry Regiment. New orders, effective immediately. The battalion is to turn east. It is to secure a facility near a town called Dachau. That is all. There is no explanation. There is no briefing. There is no warning about what they will find. Just a name on a map, a dot in Bavaria, a word Sparks has never heard before in his life. He gathers his officers. He shows them the new orders. The Berchtesgaden mission is off. Someone else will take the Eagle's Nest. Someone else will get Hitler. They will secure the Dachau facility instead, whatever that means. Sparks does not know that in a bunker under Berlin, Adolf Hitler will be dead in less than 48 hours. He does not know that his path to Berchtesgaden would have been for nothing. He does not know that a diversion order, a piece of paper redirecting his battalion 16 kilometers to the east, is about to change his life, his moral universe, and the next 62 years of his existence. He just knows that at 0600 hours his battalion will move east. The Thunderbirds fold their maps, they eat a cold breakfast. They check their weapons. They line up their vehicles on a country road in Bavaria. At dawn on April 29, 1945, they turn away from Berchtesgaden. And they march toward Dachau, April 29, 1945. 6 in the morning, the sky over Bavaria is overcast, grey, the kind of sky that swallows sound. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks stands at the front of his column, coffee in a tin cup, breath visible in the cold spring air. Behind him, over 600 men of the 3rd Battalion, 157th Infantry Regiment, are checking their weapons for the last time. They do not know where they are going. Sparks has told them only what he was told. Secure a facility near Dachau. They think it is a military barracks. They think it is a training school. Some of them think it might be a factory. They have taken hundreds of German installations in the last year. This will be another one. They mount their jeeps and half-tracks. The engines cough to life in the cold, and the column moves, 16 kilometers. That is all that separates them from something they cannot yet imagine. The road runs east through farmland. Meadows still frozen at the edges, small villages with shuttered windows, white sheets and pillowcases hanging from the upper stories. The universal signal, please. Do not shoot, we surrender. The men of the Thunderbirds do not shoot at white sheets anymore. They have seen too much, they have buried too many of their own, they just drive past. Around 10 in the morning, they hear the first sounds of fighting to the east. Machine gun fire, rifle cracks, another American unit engaging a pocket of resistance. Sparks orders the column to spread out. Combat formation, whatever is up ahead is not surrendering. By 11, the road narrows and enters a wooded area. Sparks can smell something now. He does not yet know what it is, just something wrong on the wind, something the air is not supposed to carry. The lead scout raises a hand, the column stops. There is a railway spur running parallel to the road, 20 meters through the trees. Freight cars sitting on the tracks, motionless, dozens of them, nobody is guarding them, nobody is moving them. Sparks orders a squad to check the train. The men move through the trees, they cross the tracks. The first sergeant reaches the nearest boxcar. He climbs up onto the coupling. He slides the door open. He falls off the train, not stumbles, falls backward into the mud beside the tracks. A grown man who has fought his way across 2 continents lands on his back in the dirt because he cannot stay on his feet in the presence of what is inside that boxcar. Sparks runs forward. The other men are already moving down the length of the train. Door after door slides open. 39 freight cars, 2,310 human bodies, naked, skeletal, piled to the ceiling, men, women, some children. Some of them dead for days, some of them dead for hours, some of them when the doors open are still barely breathing. The train had left Buchenwald 3 weeks earlier, on April 7th. It carried living prisoners. By the time it reached Dachau, it carried mostly the dead. The doors had been locked from the outside, no food, no water, no air, for 22 days. The men of the 3rd Battalion begin to vomit. Some of them sit down in the mud and cannot stand back up. One veteran of 6 campaigns, a sergeant from Colorado who fought at Anzio, walks 100 yards into the woods and screams. Just screams. There are no words. A private climbs into one of the boxcars looking for survivors. He finds a woman, maybe 40, maybe 70, impossible to tell. She is still breathing. He carries her out in his arms. She weighs less than a rifle. She dies before he reaches the aid station. Sparks stands beside the tracks. He does not vomit. He does not scream. He looks at the train, and he looks at his men, and something inside him goes quiet. A part of him that had been trying to stay a person for 511 days simply lets go. Then he says 3 words to his adjutant. Let's go in. The column moves again, slower now. The road runs alongside a high concrete wall topped with barbed wire. Guard towers rise every 100 meters. In the towers, black uniforms are visible. At the southwest corner of the complex, a machine gun opens fire from one of the towers. The Thunderbirds do not hesitate. They know this drill. Half-tracks pivot. 50 caliber machine guns swing up. The tower falls silent within minutes. 2 SS guards fall from the platform, dead before they hit the ground. The battalion moves through the gap in the wall. They are inside now, and they still do not understand what this place is. The interior of the complex is enormous. Barracks, administrative buildings, kitchens, warehouses, a parade ground where roll calls used to take place, and behind all of it, running along the northern edge, a fenced-off area with a smaller gate. Inside that gate, the prisoners. Meanwhile, at the same moment, 2 kilometers to the north, another American unit is approaching Dachau from a different direction. The 42nd Infantry Division, the Rainbow Division. Brigadier General Henning Linden, 52 years old, riding in a jeep with his aide and a war correspondent. One of those correspondents is a 24-year-old woman with blonde hair and steady eyes. Her name is Marguerite Higgins. She writes for the New York Herald Tribune. She has talked her way into the front line by pretending she has authorization she does not have. In 6 years she will win the Pulitzer Prize. She does not know that yet. Right now she just wants to see the war before it ends. Linden's jeep approaches the main southern entrance of the SS complex. He sees a white flag first, then he sees the man holding it, a young SS officer barely more than a boy. 23 years old, standing straight, uniform pressed, cap perfectly set. Beside him is a middle-aged civilian in a suit with a Red Cross armband. His name is Victor Maurer. He is a Swiss delegate of the International Red Cross. He has been trying for 2 days to negotiate a peaceful surrender. The SS officer takes one step forward. His name is Heinrich Wicker. He is the last commandant of Dachau. He has been in command for 24 hours. Linden's aide, Lieutenant William Cowling, later admits that his finger was on the trigger of his Tommy gun. He was praying, he said, that Wicker would make a suspicious move. Any move, just an excuse. But Wicker does not move. He salutes. He formally surrenders the camp. Under the Geneva Convention, he is now a prisoner of war. His life is legally protected. Linden accepts the surrender. Marguerite Higgins writes it down in her notebook. And then the shots start ringing out from inside the camp. This is the fourth twist. Dachau does not fall in one action. It falls in two. The Rainbow Division accepts a formal surrender at the main gate with a white flag, a Red Cross observer, and a war correspondent taking notes. Everything by the book. Everything legal. Everything protected. And at the exact same moment, half a kilometer to the west, the Thunderbird Division is entering the complex from a different direction, and nobody has told them that anyone is surrendering. Nobody has told them there is a truce. Nobody has told them the war has effectively ended at this location. Nobody has told them anything except what they saw on that train. 2 American armies. 1 camp. 2 entirely different Aprils. Inside the western half of the SS complex, First Lieutenant William P. Walsh, commander of Company I, is clearing buildings. He is 28, Irish, from Chicago. His men have already seen the train. They have already vomited. They have already stopped being who they were an hour ago. They kick doors open. They shout for surrender in broken German. Most of the SS troops in the buildings drop their weapons and put their hands up. Some of them are wearing Red Cross armbands, hoping the symbol will protect them. Walsh has one of these men escort his squad through the compound. He claims later the man tried to escape. He shoots him. Then they find the coal yard, a concrete enclosure. 20 feet high walls, used for storing coal to fire the crematoria. A single narrow exit. Walsh's men herd approximately 50 to 60 SS soldiers into the coal yard. Most of them are Waffen-SS, Hungarian. Wehrmacht auxiliaries pressed into service in the final weeks, boys and older men who have never worked in the camp. Some of them did not even know until this morning what Dachau was, but they are wearing the black uniforms. And the boxcars are 300 meters away. Walsh gives the order. One of his men, 23-year-old Private Albert C. Pruitt, mounts a machine gun on top of the coal yard wall. There are conflicting accounts of what happens next. The most common version, drawn from statements later given to army investigators, is this: someone in the crowd of SS prisoners moves. Or seems to move, or does nothing at all and someone thinks they moved. The machine gun opens fire. The Waffen-SS troops in the coal yard have no weapons. They have already surrendered. Some kneel. Some raise their hands higher. Some try to climb the walls. Some just stand there, staring at the muzzle of the gun, unable to believe what is happening. The gun fires for about 15 seconds. When it stops, the coal yard is quiet. Private Pruitt climbs down. He walks into the yard with his rifle. He finds men still breathing. He finishes them one by one. He would later tell an investigator, in words that will be entered into the official record, that he did not like to see anybody suffer. Nearby, in the boxcars along the tracks, other SS troops who tried to hide are pulled out and shot on the ground beside the wheels of the death train. Some are beaten with rifle butts by American soldiers who have run out of ammunition and have not run out of rage. At the same time, in another part of the compound, freed prisoners have grabbed SS men and beaten them to death with fists, boots, and pieces of wood. Some Americans watched and did nothing to stop them. A few Americans handed prisoners their bayonets and looked away. The official investigation report will later put the number of SS killed by the machine gun at the coal yard at 17. Historians will estimate the total killed across the entire complex that day by American soldiers and by prisoners at between 35 and 50. Some of the men who were there will say it was higher. Some will say much higher. Nobody will ever know for certain. What is certain is this: American soldiers on April 29, 1945, executed prisoners of war who had surrendered. That is a war crime. It is not a difficult legal question. It is not ambiguous. The Geneva Convention had been signed and ratified. The definitions were clear. Every man wearing an American uniform in Europe knew what the rules were, and they did it anyway. Then Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks arrives at the coal yard. He has been elsewhere in the compound, coordinating the securing of the perimeter. He hears the machine gun. He hears it stop. Then he hears it start again. He runs. What happens next is not disputed. It is not reconstructed. It is recorded in Sparks's own words, deposited at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, given under oath to Army investigators, and repeated by Sparks in interviews for the rest of his life. He rounds the corner into the coal yard. He sees the bodies. He sees the machine gun still mounted on the wall. Behind it, a private 19 years old, hands shaking, tears running down his face. Sparks does not think. He does not shout. He runs full speed at the machine gun position and kicks the gunner off the gun with his combat boot. The private lands in the dirt. Sparks grabs him by the collar and lifts him up. He puts his face inches from the boy's face. "What the hell are you doing?" The private is sobbing. He looks at his colonel. His voice cracks. "Colonel." They were trying to get away. Sparks looks at the coal yard, at the piled bodies of unarmed men who did not run because there was nowhere to run. He looks back at the boy. He does not believe him. He never will believe him. But in that moment, Felix Sparks does what he has done for 511 days. He protects his men. He does not arrest the private. He does not disarm the company. He puts a non-commissioned officer on the machine gun. He tells Walsh's men to stand down. He walks back out of the coal yard, and he never mentions the killings in a written report on that day or any day for the next 46 years. At least 12 men in that coal yard were dead who did not need to be. Wounded prisoners left without medical aid. That last detail, the medical neglect, will destroy the career of Sparks's medical officer, First Lieutenant Howard Buechner, who was seen in the vicinity and did not intervene. Buechner will spend the rest of his life trying to rewrite this day. But that is later. Right now, Sparks walks out of the coal yard, and he walks toward the prisoner compound. This is the fifth twist. The man who will be threatened with court-martial for the massacre at Dachau is the man who stopped the massacre at Dachau. Sparks is not a war criminal in this story. Sparks is the officer who kicked a machine gunner off his weapon while it was still hot. Sparks is the officer who used physical force against his own soldier to save the lives of the SS men who were still breathing. Sparks is the reason the death toll in the coal yard was 17 and not 57. And the United States Army will thank him for this by preparing to put him on trial. The paperwork that will land on Patton's desk will not distinguish between the officer who ordered the machine gun to fire and the officer who kicked its gunner into the mud. Both men wore silver leaves on their collars. Both men were in the compound. Both men were responsible for what happened. And under military law, the commanding officer is always responsible, no matter what he was doing at the moment the crime occurred. Sparks knows this. He has known it since he lifted the boy off the gun. He has known that in stopping the killings, he has also become the man who will be blamed for them. He does it anyway. He walks through the inner gate of the prisoner compound. The famous iron gate with words in wrought metal across the top. Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free. And on the other side of the gate, 32,000 human beings look at him. They do not cheer at first. They do not know if they are hallucinating. Some of them have been in this camp for 12 years. Some have been here 12 days. All of them have watched friends die that morning. They have watched them die every morning for as long as they can remember. Then somebody in the crowd sees the American helmet, and somebody else sees the shoulder patch of the 45th Division. A blue diamond with a yellow thunderbird, and 32,000 voices explode. They come running. They come crawling. They come at Sparks's men in a tide of striped uniforms and skeletal arms. They grab at the Americans. They kiss their hands. They kiss their weapons. Some of them collapse at the soldiers' feet and cannot get up. Some of them will die of the excitement itself within hours. Sparks stands in the middle of it, a 27-year-old man from a copper town in Arizona holding his M1 carbine, being embraced by a Polish priest who has not been outside these walls since 1940. Meanwhile, near the main gate, Marguerite Higgins is climbing onto a small platform with a chaplain. She is one of the first women any of these prisoners have seen in years. She raises her hands for quiet. The chaplain begins to pray, the Lord's Prayer, in Latin, then in French, then in Polish, then in German, then in Yiddish, The prisoners join in, one language at a time, a rolling wave of voices, so weak they can only mouth the words. Higgins is crying. She does not write about this in her dispatch, some things she keeps for herself. By nightfall the guns are silent inside Dachau. American troops are trying to feed 32,000 starving people who cannot eat solid food without dying. Doctors are triaging by walking down the rows of bodies and marking the ones who might live with chalk. The dying continues. In the first 2 weeks after liberation, over 100 prisoners die every single day. Their bodies are so far gone that food, warmth, and medical care are not enough to save them. And somewhere in the confusion of that first night, the young SS lieutenant who surrendered the camp disappears. Heinrich Wicker was last seen alive walking with a group of American soldiers away from the main gate. He was in custody, he was legally protected, he was 23 years old, he is never seen alive again, his body is not identified. His grave is not marked. No American soldier will ever come forward and admit to killing him. No court will ever hear evidence about his death. He simply walks off the pages of history at some point during the afternoon of April 29, 1945, and does not come back. Historians almost universally believe he was executed. Nobody can prove it. This is the sixth twist. The man who followed the rules, who stood under a white flag, who surrendered his camp with a Red Cross witness present, who did everything the Geneva Convention required of a defeated officer, is the one who does not survive the day. The commandants who ran Dachau for 12 years are already gone. Weiter is dying in Austria. Weiss is walking through the countryside in a stolen suit. Both of them will live longer than the boy who took the fall for their war. Wicker's fate is not in any report. His disappearance is not investigated. Nobody in the American chain of command asks where he went. He is a footnote in the surrender narrative and nothing more. And this is important, because when the official investigation begins 6 days later, the killings that will be documented are the ones in the coal yard. The formal, witnessed, photographed executions, the disappearances, the individual killings, the beatings, the men shot in the alleys between barracks, all of that will fall through the cracks. The paperwork will focus on the incident that had an army photographer present. The one where Private Arland Musser of the Signal Corps took pictures with an issued camera that later ended up in the National Archives. Wicker has no photographer, Wicker has no witness, Wicker has no report, Wicker just has an empty uniform, somewhere in Bavaria, and a mother in Baden-Württemberg who will never know what happened to her son. Night, Felix Sparks writes 2 sentences in his personal diary. Reach Dachau. Cannot describe. He does not write more. He does not sleep. At dawn on April 30, 1945, his battalion mounts up and drives east toward Munich, 20 kilometers. The birthplace of the Nazi Party, the city where Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, the city where the Beer Hall Putsch happened in 1923. By nightfall on April 30, Munich falls to the 45th Division. The Thunderbirds walk through streets lined with the same white sheets they have been seeing for weeks. Somewhere in that same 24-hour window, 700 kilometers to the north, in a concrete bunker under Berlin, Adolf Hitler puts a Walther PPK to his head and pulls the trigger. The war in Europe has 8 days left. The investigation of Dachau has not yet begun. On May 3, 1945, 5 days after the liberation, a message reaches 7th Army headquarters. Reports of irregularities at Dachau during the operation of April 29. Multiple deaths of surrendered enemy personnel. Photographs in circulation. Possible violations of the rules of land warfare. The 7th Army Inspector General is instructed to open an investigation. The officer assigned to conduct it is Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Whittaker, Assistant Inspector General. A career officer, meticulous, not sentimental. He begins interviewing witnesses within 48 hours. He interviews Sparks, he interviews Walsh, he interviews Buchner. He interviews Private Pruitt. He collects the photographs, including the ones Musser took with the Signal Corps camera. He reads the sworn statements. He walks through the coal yard himself. On June 8, 1945, Whittaker submits his report. 8 pages, single-spaced, attached exhibits including photographs, witness lists, and physical evidence descriptions. His conclusion is direct. There has been a violation of the rules of land warfare. Multiple enemy personnel were killed after surrender. The chain of command in the 3rd Battalion, 157th Infantry Regiment failed to prevent these killings. Court-martial proceedings are recommended against Lieutenant Colonel Felix L. Sparks. Court-martial proceedings are recommended against First Lieutenant William P. Walsh. Charges of dereliction of duty are recommended against First Lieutenant Howard Buchner for failure to render medical aid. The report is forwarded up the chain of command. This is the seventh twist. On May 8, 1945, exactly 1 month before the Whitaker report is completed, Germany surrenders. VE Day. The war in Europe ends, and with that surrender, the occupation zones are formally activated. American forces are reorganized. Bavaria is placed under the administration of the United States Third Army, and on the same day the commanding general of the Third Army is appointed military governor of Bavaria. That general is George S. Patton. The 45th Infantry Division, which fought its way across Sicily, Italy, France and Germany under 7th Army command, is now in the occupation, part of the Third Army Zone. Its personnel matters, its disciplinary matters, its pending court-martials, all of it now falls under Patton's jurisdiction. If V-Day had come 1 week later, the Whitaker report would have stayed inside the 7th Army. It would have gone to General Alexander Patch. Patch was a good soldier. Patch was a legalist. Patch's own son had been killed in action 6 months earlier, and Patch had responded by working harder, not by breaking rules. Under Patch, Sparks might well have gone to trial. Instead, the map lines shift on May 8, 1945, and the 8-page report that will decide Felix Sparks's future begins the slow bureaucratic climb toward a wooden desk in a spa town in the Alps, where a 59-year-old general is waiting. A general who has been to Ohrdruf. A general who has thrown up behind a shed. A general who has already made his decision. Felix Sparks does not know any of this yet. In early summer 1945, he is quietly reassigned while the investigation continues. His command status is uncertain. His men do not know what is happening. His wife Mary, 3,000 miles away in Colorado, does not know either. He does not tell her. He waits. Days pass, then weeks. He sits in a rear echelon office and shuffles paper. Once, someone leaves a Stars and Stripes newspaper on his desk. The front page shows photographs from Nuremberg, war crimes prosecutors preparing the International Tribunal against Nazi leadership. The article talks about the rule of law, the importance of prosecuting even the winning side when the winning side breaks the rules. Sparks reads the article. Then he folds the newspaper and puts it in a drawer. He does not sleep that night either. Then, one afternoon in the summer of 1945, a runner comes to his office. He has orders, effective immediately, report to Third Army headquarters. Bad Tölz, Bavaria. The General Tölz, Bavaria. Summer 1945. The town sits in a valley south of Munich, surrounded by pine forests and pasture land. A spa town. Before the war, families came here to take the waters. Now the largest building in Bad Tölz, an SS officer training academy called Junkerschule, has been converted into the headquarters of the United States Third Army. Felix Sparks arrives by jeep. He is in his Class A uniform. Silver leaves on his collar. He has not eaten breakfast. He has not slept in 3 nights. The building is enormous. Marble corridors. Nazi eagles chiseled out of the stone walls, but you can still see where they used to be. Soldiers snap to attention as he passes. He does not return the salutes. His hands are heavy at his sides. He is escorted upstairs, down a long hallway, to a heavy wooden door. A staff colonel opens it for him. He steps inside. The office is smaller than he expected. Wood paneling. A single window looking out over the mountains. Large desk. And behind the desk a 59-year-old man with silver hair, 4 stars on each shoulder, a single ivory-handled Colt revolver on his hip. General George S. Patton looks up. He does not stand. He does not salute. He does not offer a chair. For a long moment he just looks at Sparks, reads his face, takes in the silver leaves, the campaign ribbons, the tired eyes of a man who no longer looks 27. Then Patton looks down at the desk. On it sits a manila folder, the Whitaker report, 8 pages. Sparks can see his own name on the tab. Patton picks up the folder. He weighs it in his hand. He looks at Sparks again. And then he does something Sparks will remember for the rest of his life. He tears the report in half, not carefully, not ceremoniously, just once, and then again. The pages come apart in his hands and flutter down onto the desk in ragged pieces. Patton speaks. His voice is flat, almost bored. I have had these goddamn charges investigated. They are a bunch of crap. You have been a damn fine soldier. Go on home. Sparks does not answer. He cannot answer. Patton waves a hand toward the door. The audience is over. The meeting has lasted from the moment Sparks stepped inside to the moment he steps back out, less than 60 seconds. Sparks walks out of the office, down the marble hall, past the salutes he still does not return. He gets into the jeep. He does not remember the drive back to his unit. He is not going to trial. He is not going to prison. He is not going to lose his commission. He is going home. He does not know that he will not speak about this meeting, publicly, for 40 years. He does not know that he will keep silent through Nuremberg, through Korea, through the Cold War, through Vietnam, through every decade of his career, because he does not want to reopen what Patton closed. He does not know any of that yet. Right now he just sits in a jeep on a road in Bavaria and holds his hands very still in his lap so nobody can see them shaking. Why did Patton do it? This is the question that historians have argued about for 80 years. There is no clean answer. But there are 4 honest ones, and they all matter. The first reason is Ordruf. Patton had been to a camp. He had smelled what Sparks smelled. He had seen the lime-covered bodies. He had thrown up behind a shed. When Patton read the Whittaker report, he was not reading it as a military judge. He was reading it as a man who had done what his soldiers did in front of a mass grave, in the privacy of his own body. He had vomited, they had killed. The distance between those 2 reactions was, in Patton's mind, not as wide as the law pretended it was. The second reason is Patton's philosophy of command. Patton believed, above almost everything else, in loyalty to the men who did the fighting. He had slapped soldiers he thought were cowards. He had shouted at officers he thought were weak. But when the fighting was over and the paperwork came, he protected his own with a ferocity that other generals found embarrassing. Sparks was not one of Patton's men. Sparks was 7th Army. But he was an American infantry battalion commander who had bled from Sicily to Bavaria, and to Patton that was the only credential that mattered. The third reason is the political situation in the summer of 1945, and this is where the story stops being flattering to Patton. By July, Patton was already unraveling. He had begun making comments in private and then in public that appalled his superiors. He compared denazification to persecuting the losers of an American election. He said that Nazis were just German Republicans. He said the real enemy was the Soviet Union and that America should rearm the Wehrmacht and march east. He was drinking. He was writing furious letters to his wife. He was losing the argument with history, and he knew it. Dismissing the Whittaker report was, for Patton, a way of pushing back against a post-war order he did not respect. He did not think American soldiers should hang for killing SS men. He did not think American soldiers should apologize for anything they did in Europe. Protecting Sparks was in part an act of defiance against a political moment Patton refused to accept. The fourth reason is the coldest one. A trial of Felix Sparks would have been a disaster for the United States Army. Imagine it, American soldiers on the witness stand describing the boxcars. Photographs of Dachau prisoners shown to a military jury. Holocaust survivors flown in to testify about what the SS had done. And on the other side, prosecutors arguing that American boys should go to prison for killing the men who ran the death factories. The verdict would not matter. The trial itself would be the disaster. Whether Sparks was convicted or acquitted, the message to the world would be the same. America is willing to jail its own soldiers for shooting SS guards. That message could not be sent. Not while the ovens at Auschwitz were still cooling. Not while the world was still counting the 6 million. Patton understood this. So did the officers above him. So did the officers above them. The Whittaker report was not just dismissed. It was buried, classified, filed away in a drawer at the National Archives where it would sit, marked secret for the next 46 years. That is why Patton did what he did. Not because he was noble. Not because he was corrupt, because the situation was impossible and he was the man in the chair. By late fall of 1945, the final legal opinion is written. It comes from Colonel Charles L. Decker, an acting Deputy Judge Advocate General of the United States Army. He has reviewed the Whittaker report. He has considered Patton's decision to dismiss the charges. He has weighed the law against the circumstances. His conclusion, written in careful legal prose, is one of the most honest sentences the United States government produced in the entire year of 1945. It appears that there was a violation of the letter of international law in that the SS guards seem to have been shot without trial. But in the light of the conditions which greeted the eyes of the first combat troops to reach Dachau, it is not believed that justice or equity demand that the difficult and perhaps impossible task of fixing individual responsibility now be undertaken. Read that again. He does not deny the crime, he does not excuse the killings, he does not pretend that what happened at Dachau was legal. He says plainly that it was against international law, and then he says that pursuing justice for that crime, given what the soldiers had walked into, would itself be an injustice. That is not law, that is philosophy, and it is the philosophy that ended the case. The file is stamped, classified secret, placed in a cardboard box, shipped across the Atlantic, filed in the National Archives, Record Group 407, and there it sits. For 46 years, October 2, 1945, 5 months after VE Day, General Patton holds a press conference in Bad Tölz. He tells reporters that the Nazi Party in Germany was essentially the same as the Democratic or Republican parties in America. He says most Nazis joined for the same reasons Americans joined political parties, and that most of them should be allowed to keep their jobs. The comment explodes in the American press. Eisenhower summons Patton. Patton drives 300 miles through a rainstorm to Frankfurt. The conversation between the two old friends is not recorded, but eyewitnesses say Patton comes out of it pale. On October 7, 1945, in a ceremony at Bad Tölz, in the same building where he tore up the Whitaker Report, Patton hands command of the Third Army to Lieutenant General Lucien Truscott. He is reassigned to command the 15th Army, a ceremonial paper command whose only job is to write the official history of the war in Europe. Patton hates it. He tells his aide he wants to resign from the army so he can go home and say what he thinks. His aide talks him out of it. On December 9, 1945, 2 months later, Patton is riding in the back seat of a Cadillac staff car near Mannheim, Germany, on the way to a pheasant hunt. His car collides with an American truck at low speed. The impact is minor. Everyone in both vehicles walks away except Patton, whose neck is broken. He is taken to a military hospital in Heidelberg. He lies paralyzed for 12 days. He is 59 years old. He has commanded armies across 3 continents. He has been photographed on the covers of Time and Life. He has slapped a soldier and been forgiven. He has vomited at Ohrdruf and torn up a report at Bad Tölz. On December 21, 1945, at approximately 6 in the evening, George S. Patton dies of a pulmonary embolism. He is buried in Luxembourg, in the American military cemetery there, in the same soil as the men of the Third Army who died in the Battle of the Bulge under his command. The Dachau file remains classified. Felix Sparks goes home to Colorado. He enrolls in law school at the University of Colorado on the GI Bill. He graduates in 1947. He opens a law practice in the small town of Delta. He is elected district attorney. He loses re-election in 1952 and is appointed to the Colorado Supreme Court by Governor Ed Johnson. He stays on the court. He remains active in the Colorado Army National Guard. By the time he retires in 1979, he is a brigadier general. He does not talk about Dachau in public, not to reporters, not to his neighbors, not to his 3 children, Kirk, Scott, and Jean. Mary Sparks, the woman he married in Tucson in 1941, knows something is wrong. She has known it since he came home in 1945. He has nightmares. He wakes up in the dark and cannot go back to sleep. Sometimes she finds him sitting in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, holding a cup of coffee that has gone cold, looking at nothing. She never asks him what he saw. He never tells her. And then, in 1986, a book is published. The author is a retired doctor named Howard Buechner. In April 1945, First Lieutenant Howard Buechner was the medical officer of the 3rd Battalion, 157th Infantry Regiment. He was the man the Whitaker Report cited for dereliction of duty. He was the officer who failed to render medical aid to wounded SS men in the coal yard. He carried that citation on his record for 40 years, along with the private knowledge of what he had failed to do that day. He processes that knowledge by writing a book. The book is called Dachau, the Hour of the Avenger. Its central claim is that over 500 SS troops were massacred at Dachau on April 29, 1945. Not 17, not 50, over 500. Buechner claims he witnessed the massacre personally. He claims a systematic execution operation was carried out over several hours. He claims the killings were far larger in scale than anything the army ever admitted. The book is not taken seriously by professional historians. The numbers do not match any known evidence. The witness accounts do not corroborate his version. Büchner's book is treated by most scholars as a personal exercise in confession and self-justification. But there is one group of people who love the book: Holocaust deniers. By 1986, an organized movement is emerging in the United States, in Britain, in Germany, in France, that argues the Holocaust was exaggerated. That the death camps were labor camps, that the gas chambers are propaganda, that the survivors are lying. The movement seizes on Büchner's book. They cite it in their pamphlets, they post it on their networks, they use it to make a specific argument. Look at what the Americans did to the SS at Dachau. Hundreds killed, machine-gunned in a coal yard. If the Americans were capable of that, what does that tell you about the Americans? And by extension, what does that tell you about the whole story of the Holocaust? You may see where this is going. The eighth twist of this story is not what happened at Dachau. It is what happened to the memory of Dachau. It is not the crime, it is the aftermath. Howard Büchner, the officer who could not save wounded SS men on April 29, 1945, becomes 40 years later an inadvertent source for the movement that denies the Holocaust ever happened. The man who stood beside Felix Sparks in the coal yard becomes the ghost that haunts Felix Sparks in old age. The very massacre that Patton buried to protect his soldiers is dug up by their own comrade to serve the argument that the war itself was a fraud. And now the 70-year-old brigadier general in Colorado, the man who kicked a machine gunner off his weapon, the man who has spent 40 years not talking about Dachau, has to make a choice. He can keep his silence, he can protect his men, he can let Patton's tier of paper stay torn, or he can talk. In 1989, the National Archives quietly begins declassifying the Dachau file. By 1991, the 8-page Whitaker report is publicly available for the first time. Historians descend on it, the photographs come out, names come out. Felix Sparks is 74 years old. He gives his first extended public interview about April 29, 1945. He tells the truth as he saw it. He tells about the boxcars, he tells about the coal yard, he tells about kicking the private off the machine gun. He tells about counting the dead. He does not defend what happened, he does not attack his men, he does not attack Patton. He tells it flat and clear, the way a soldier tells the story of a bad day, the way a lawyer states facts to a jury. And then he does something more. He starts speaking, publicly, repeatedly, against Holocaust denial. He gives a speech at a Holocaust memorial event in Denver. He gives a speech at a memorial in Nordhausen. He gives interviews to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum for their permanent archive. He writes to newspapers when deniers publish. He confronts Büchner's book in public. His most famous line is spoken at a Holocaust remembrance event in Denver in the 1990s. He looks at the audience of survivors and their children and their grandchildren, and he says, "Tell those who were not there that it happened." That is what he does with the last 20 years of his life. He tells them, anyone who will listen. Anyone who might one day be tempted to believe otherwise. Mary Sparks is beside him at almost every event, 66 years of marriage. She sees him at the podium, she sees him at the microphones, she sees her husband, finally, speak. On September 25, 2007, Felix L. Sparks dies at his home in Colorado. He is 90 years old. His obituary in the Denver Post identifies him as a former Colorado Supreme Court justice, a brigadier general and a liberator of Dachau. Mary lives another 11 years. She dies in 2018. Their son Kirk gives Sparks's papers to the University of Colorado. His interviews, his hand-annotated combat maps, his memoir drafts, his personal photographs, everything goes into the archive. Everything is available now to anyone who wants to look. The Whitaker report is available too. You can read it. You can read Patton's decision. You can read Colonel Decker's careful legal opinion. You can read Sparks's own account of kicking the private off the gun. You can look at the Musa photographs. Nothing is hidden anymore. The question that started this story is still there. Patton was asked to court-martial the soldiers who killed SS guards at Dachau. His answer was to tear up the report and tell Felix Sparks to go home. Was that justice? Was that a cover-up? Was it both? The most honest answer we have is not from Patton. It is not from Sparks. It is not from any general or any survivor or any historian. It is from Colonel Charles Decker in that final legal opinion buried for 46 years. Reading his conclusion, you see a man doing the only thing an honest lawyer could do in that room. He named the crime, and then he named the impossibility of prosecuting it, both at the same time. 4 men made 4 different choices in this story. Patton chose loyalty over law, Sparks chose silence for 40 years and then chose truth. Buchner chose to write a book that ended up serving the wrong side of history. And Decker chose to write down what he actually believed on paper in an official document and let the future judge him for it. You get to decide, watching this, which one of them was right, or whether any of them were. The bodies in the boxcars have been buried for 80 years. The coal yard at Dachau is a memorial now. Visitors walk through it every day. Most of them do not know what happened there. They do not know that a young battalion commander from Colorado kicked one of his own men off a machine gun that day. They do not know that a 4-star general tore up a report in a wood-paneled office in Bad Tölz to protect him. They do not know that the last commandant of Dachau was a 23-year-old boy who followed the rules of surrender to the letter and disappeared anyway. But you know now, and now you have to decide what to do with knowing. Felix Sparks decided. In his last 20 years he told the story to everyone who would listen. He carried it into rooms full of strangers, he carried it into archives, he carried it into the future. The last words he wanted the world to remember, from all of it, are the ones he spoke in Colorado, to an audience of Holocaust survivors and their descendants in the twilight of his life. Tell those who were not there that it happened.